Hey, what is up, everybody? Platform Disciple here. Today, I wanted to take a look back at Infinity Ward's most recent set, Intrigue, because we're really moving very close to seeing the next set, Revelations, come out. And as a reminder, the Kickstarter is still running. And if you haven't managed to get in on some of those deals, you still have some time to do that. I should also mention that the Kickstarter has officially been successfully funded, so round of applause to everybody on the dev team as well as the community for helping support the game. It's really great to see things all come together. But we've had so much time at this point to think about Intrigue, and we're about to get this whole set of new cards. It feels really appropriate to kind of reflect on the impact that Intrigue has had on the game. So I have created a top 10 list of the cards that I think have affected the game and the health of the game the most. And to clarify what I mean by that, I am not necessarily creating a list of the 10 most powerful cards, although I think many of these cards are very powerful. I'm creating a list of the 10 cards that I feel have really expanded the game in terms of the types of decks you can play and overall made the game a better experience for everybody. That if you're seeing a card that's maybe you're expecting to be on this list but isn't, it's not because I think the card is bad. It's because I think that the cards on this list have had maybe a greater impact in terms of the types of decks that we might see. Okay, with that taken into account, we're going from 10 all the way up to 1, 10 being the least significant and 1 being the card that I think is the most significant. And the first card on the list is none other than Useless Cow. And I'm not making a joke here. Useless Cow is a meme in this community. It's very funny, and I think that alone might be reason enough for it to be on the list. But it turns out that the cow deck is no joke. That as funny as Useless Cow is, if you see somebody who's running a few cow mandos in the command zone, you know that they're playing a deck that is pretty serious, that they can aggro you out of the game very quickly. And Useless Cow is the only reason that that is possible, that the cow mando deck was non-existent up until Intrigue came out. And given how, I think, popular that deck has become, there's a question of maybe we'll actually see some more cow support in the future and have it turn from a kind of fringe aggro deck into really a full-fledged threat, and we're already almost there. Next on the list, we have Extirpate. And Extirpate is a card I have on this list because it provides a card that can only be accessed by decks that have a factionless commander. The reason that that's significant is that for the majority of Infinity Ward's history, if you were running a factionless commander, you are really making a sacrifice in terms of the type of power that your deck can bring to the table. That you don't have access to as diverse and powerful of a pool of cards, and Extirpate helps balance the scales a little bit back towards the factionless decks not being as weak. In addition to being a card that supports this type of deck that largely historically hasn't been, this card also gets rid of everything in the game. That it serves as a potential safety valve against cards that are really difficult to interact with, that I think that having a card that just hands down kills anything is reasonable for the game to have, especially at the cost at 7. So, big fan of the card. I do like seeing Factionless getting some more support as well. All right. Next, we have Beck, Dragon Tamer. And I think it's also fair to mention Agent Coil Synergy in this same category, but I think Beck, Dragon Tamer has turned out to be a little more impactful, but the same reason applies, which is that Beck, Dragon Tamer, and Agent Coil Synergy both make it possible to play decks that were just frankly impossible to play before. They support a type of strategy that exists across every faction. In Beck's case, that's dragons, and in Agent Coil Synergy's case, that's Agent Coils or agents. And having the ability to play those cards together in a deck in a way that feels fair and doesn't allow the deck to exploit other faction-specific cards, ultimately, I think makes the game more interesting. That I like these specialized commanders that let you play the game differently, and frankly, I'd like to continue to see more of them. So that's enough said for Beck, Dragon, Tamer. Let's move on. Okay, next card, Berg, Root of Resurrection. And this card, I think, because it is just a single Warpath Purity, opens up a lot of different kinds of decks you can build. The card really changes how you play the game because it produces a card in your hand every turn, which is interesting for something like Logarithmatron. I'm using it in that deck. It also, by giving you Brings Life by Passing, lets you ramp to unheard of levels regardless of what type of deck you're playing. You just need to be in one Warpath Purity to get access to huge amounts of ramp. And then the ability to enrage those Brings Life by Passing turns Berg into a card that can really be a core piece of your deck in terms of presenting threat. That Berg has turned out to be a card that when I initially looked at it, I did not have a strong reaction, but now that we've seen the kind of full lifespan of the Intrigue set, I think that this card really deserves a place on this list. Okay. Next, we have Empath Battery. And Empath Battery is on this list because it is the most powerful fortress healing and morale healing card in the game. Hands down. That's my opinion, at least. The fact that you can stack up multiple Empath Batteries, the fact that it can trigger every turn, potentially, if you're playing the right type of deck. The health gain, the morale gain really adds up, and we haven't seen a whole lot of cards that allow you to gain a lot of health in Infinity Wars very efficiently, and this is a new mainstay in a lot of decks. Supports a lot of different types of strategies, and it gives a way to play against aggro and burn decks that wasn't possible before because the ability to gain health was just not efficient enough. Card has been changed a bit over its lifespan because I think that it started out maybe not strong enough, then maybe became too strong, and now it's found its place as a card that supports a deck that might use a high density of humans, but no matter what, it is the best health and morale gaining card in the game. And because of that, it has really changed what decks are capable of. Okay, next, we have United Front. And this card is on this list because it is, first of all, just really, really good. But second of all, because I really, really like seeing cards that take on historical cards from Infinity Wars and kind of breathe more life into them. That the Three Sages, Daude, Lingbao, and Yuan-Chi are totally fine cards, but because the game has changed so much, we maybe don't see them as much as we used to way back in the day, and this card lets you see those familiar faces, those familiar cards, again, without having to buff them in any kind of way by just kind of packaging them all into one card. So I really like this card. I think it's got a lot of flavor to it, and I think it really, I think it pulls together some core themes of the faction into one card in a really efficient, powerful package. Hopefully that came out reasonably concise. It's hard to say for this card why I like it so much without leaning too heavily into this card's really good, but I think that just the fact that it kind of gives me a nostalgia hit for seeing all these guys together again is meaningful to me. Okay, next, and this, I know this is a personal list of personal preferences, but within this list of personal preferences, this one is a real favorite of mine at this point, which is Merlin, Master Tactician. And Merlin offers a unique effect for every faction that you have in your command zone. And if you have Enya in the command zone, you have access to all of those effects. I really like Merlin because of the fact that he's one card, but really has the diversity of many, many different cards that you can play him in a lot of different decks, and he doesn't necessarily do the same thing in each of those decks. I think that the card is skill testing, it gives you lots of choices to make, and ultimately it's very fun to use. My one gripe with the card, which doesn't affect me very much, is that I think that this card may be a little challenging for newer players, where it's very difficult to see what the card does at any given time. But to give it some leeway here, it does really only have its effect once, and then you don't have to worry about what it does again, hopefully for the rest of the game. But there are some other cards within Infinity Wars that have this problem to a greater degree, so I don't think Merlin is really the ultimate culprit here, but maybe just a reminder that it could be helpful for some of those cards that have the ability to make multiple choices, to have those choices a little more easy to access for players who are newer to the game. Okay, anyways, Merlin. Really, really one of my favorite cards. Okay, next. Memorial the Heroes. And Memorial the Heroes, when it came out, was really, really strong. It's been nerfed at this point so that it's 10 cost, and now it feels very reasonable. The dust is kind of settled. We've kind of become accustomed to the card. But what I think should be said about this may be the best designed Flame Dawn card that costs a lot of resources. That Flame Dawn, because of it being such an aggressive faction, has always kind of struggled with what do these high cost cards need to do to make them worth playing. And Memorial the Heroes has really solved that. And not only has it solved it in the sense that you could play this in an aggressive triple Flame Dawn deck and feel reasonably good about it if you get to the late game, but it's also because its single purity offered the ability to support all kinds of other decks, like combo decks, that take advantage of that extra character and maybe go for a one-shot kill, or maybe just go for some extra value off of their characters. And overall, great card for the game. Really, I think, has expanded the kinds of decks you can play, especially within that Flame Dawn faction. We now see some Flame Dawn decks that are okay with playing the game a little slower because they have a meaningful payoff that comes in later. Okay, and we've got another Flame Dawn card. I think this card is very fair to have on this list, and that card is Kali, Reluctant Leader, and this deserves the number 2 slot for sure. That Kali, Reluctant Leader, has proven to be very, very good, but has also, I think, really generated a lot of interest around cards that just were kind of dead before, that they just weren't really interesting. That Flame Dawn Aspirant was not a card that you really saw people play. And now, Flame Dawn Aspirant has significant meaning, and the cards that reference and create Flame Dawn Aspirants also have significant meaning. That it offers a very different way you can play Flame Dawn. I like that a lot. And I hope to see more cards like this. That this card supports Flame Dawn Aspirants, which is the Flame Dawn Unlimited card. I would like to see some of the other factions' Unlimited cards get kind of a similar treatment. Maybe not literally the same card, but something that gives you a reason to put a lot of those Unlimited cards in your deck. So like, One of Many is a card that, frankly, you just don't really see ever. And it would be cool if there was a kind of equivalent in other factions that gave those Unlimited characters a little extra oomph, made you care about them a little more. All right, so Kali, very strong card, very significant impact on the game in terms of giving Flame Dawn a little more diversity in the types of ways that they can play the game. And now we're on to our number 1. And maybe you've guessed what it is, maybe you haven't. But our number 1 is Medi, Herald of the Unknown. And Medi, first of all, I think has turned out to be a much better card than I ever thought he would be. I thought that his ability to draft random cards was mostly just for fun and was goofy, but he's turned out to be a very real card that can play in very real decks that are competitive. However, he still offers that ability to have fun and have a very diverse game where every game feels different, regardless whether you're playing with or against Medi. That I don't think we'll ever see a card like this ever again. And I think that he's going to be a card that is going to be part of Infinity War's play experience for the rest of time, pretty much. That you will always have the option to play a deck that is fun and still is reasonably competitive through Medi. And for that reason, he deserves number one on this list for being the card that has offered the most play experience to players across the board. And that wraps up our list. And with that, I think it's fair to say that Intrigue was a really successful set. That this list was not easy for me to make because there were a lot of other cards that didn't make the list that were also really spectacular. That there were very few cards within Intrigue that are overlookable. That most of them were able to find a home and able to change up the game in a meaningful way. And for that reason, I think it's fair to say we have a lot of reason to be really excited about Revelations, this upcoming set, that if it's even close to how refreshing Intrigue was, we're going to be able to see a whole bunch of new types of decks and strategies come out of the new cards. And that pretty much wraps it up. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, take it easy.